In a high-stakes diplomatic exchange, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Malaysia. Rubio revealed that Lavrov floated a new idea on Ukraine, though not a breakthrough. It could open the door to possible negotiations. The 50-minute meeting comes amid a deadly spike in Russian attacks on Kyiv, with missiles and drones raining down on the capital just hours before. Rubio says he relayed President Trump's frustration over Moscow's lack of flexibility and stressed the urgent need for a roadmap to end the war. Let's listen in to what the U.S. Secretary of State had to say on these talks.
We will engage any time that we have an opportunity to do so, like we did today. I echoed what the President has said, both a disappointment and frustration at the lack of progress in peace talks or in a path forward. So we'll continue to engage. We shared some ideas and comments, which I'll take back to Washington as early as this evening in terms of calls and reflected, and perhaps there's something to build on there. But it was a frank conversation. It was an important one. We had it, and we talked about some other items as well and related to the war in Ukraine, but that was the President has said that that's an option that's available to him, both under existing authorities, but primarily if the Senate and the House can pass legislation that gives them the opportunity to do that. So we've been engaging with Congress on what that bill would look like. Obviously, the President needs flexibility on how those sanctions would be applied and when, because it gives them, maximum leverage in any conversation and negotiation. So he has talked about that as being a real option, and now obviously we've been engaging with the Senate in particular over the last week on what that bill will look like, and the leaders of both chambers have said that they're prepared to begin to move forward on that. We've expressed this to the Russians weeks ago. We told them that the moment would come where something like this could happen, and we'll continue to express it because that's the reality.
Meanwhile, Rubio also signaled optimism on Gaza's ceasefire, saying U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff is hopeful that proximity talks could be held soon. With rising global tensions, Washington appears to be pushing harder on multiple diplomatic fronts. Let's listen in.
I spoke to Steve Witkoff last night, and he's optimistic that proximity talks will begin fairly soon, expedited and facilitated by the Qataris and the Egyptians. And so, but we've seen talks fall apart in the past at that stage of proximity talks. So I think we're closer, and I think perhaps we're closer than we've been in quite a while, and we're hopeful. But we also recognize there's still some challenges in the way, and one of the fundamental challenges is Hamas's unwillingness to disarm, which would end this conflict immediately.
Now we're joined by Keith Vaz. He's a former UK minister, joining us live from London. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. How significant is this new idea from Lavrov? Could it really lead to meaningful negotiations on Ukraine, according to you?
Well, any meeting between the foreign minister of Russia and the Secretary of State of the United States is very welcome. From my dealings with Lavrov when I was the Minister for Europe, he dealt directly, obviously, with the Foreign Minister of the UK, but I had the privilege of attending those meetings. Lavrov is a very wily figure. He's been there for a couple of decades, so he wouldn't be saying things unless they were meaningful. As you know, from day one, the Trump administration has talked about a ceasefire in the Ukraine. This is one of the big wins that Donald Trump has always wanted. And so far, it's eluded him. And in the last week, he's been quite critical of President Putin. And he didn't really want to deal with him, he said. So this is very positive. And so long as it leads to a meaningful discussion and a ceasefire, then it is something that one should welcome. But you should put that against the meeting that Emmanuel Macron had yesterday with Keir Starmer in London, and a demand from the President of France and the other European leaders that there should be a ceasefire. The call from Chancellor Merkel recently that there should be reparations being paid, supported by Mr. Kellogg from the United States, putting the costs at about $500 billion. So we're in the right language, but we're nowhere near getting to the ceasefire that both Russia and the Ukraine desperately need.
And why do you think Russia chose to float this idea now? What's the timing? What does this suggest?
Well, they seem to be doing quite well as far as the war is concerned. We understand that they have been capturing more territory. Obviously, with the Trump administration, the support for Ukraine was not as strong as it was under President Biden. So there have been differences between the two administrations. But I think that the Russians are, and Lavrov in particular, is a very, very clever man. He has been around, as I said, for a very long time, and he would not be saying this unless there is a pathway in his mind to get things moving in a particular direction. I'm afraid that Marco Rubio, though he's experienced as a senator from Florida in the US Senate, comes nowhere near the experience of someone like Lavrov. And he should be very cautious and careful in dealing with such a wily operator as Mr. Lavrov.
And now I would press on about Rubio's comments or message about President Trump's frustrations. Does that suggest any shift in US's policy towards Ukraine?
Well, Donald Trump is always frustrated unless something happens tomorrow or today. But the world of diplomacy does not behave like that. It takes a long time to build up alliances, and he would do well to work with his NATO allies, in particular Germany and France and the United Kingdom. Those three countries have been working hard to make sure that there are proper discussions and proper support being given to the peace process. I think the problem with the President of the United States is he wants to do it all himself. And that's not how diplomacy works in the world. Of course, America is the most powerful country on earth with the biggest defense budget on the planet. But still, you do need to work with people if you're going to get change. And therefore, it is important that we act and behave in a way that understands you can't solve everything immediately in diplomacy. As someone who's worked in the Foreign Office, who's had to deal with many different European countries over the period of time that I was a minister, it takes a lot of time to build up those relationships. They don't exist at the moment between Russia and the United States because they've been in cold storage for the 4 years that Biden has been president. So this will take time, but this is an important step forward. I think everyone hopes that there will be peace. On the subject of the call for reparations and rebuilding, the best way to bring down the cost of rebuilding Ukraine is for the Russians to stop bombing Ukraine and for people to get to that table, sit round it, America, Russia, and the Ukraine, together with Britain, France, and Germany, and get those peace talks going. That's the best way to end this conflict, to get round the table and start talking peace.
And does this meeting show any cracks in Moscow's strategy, or is it more about buying time on the battlefield, according to you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they are very clever operators, the Russians. They have been here before many times. They wouldn't have invaded if they didn't think they had an end game. Of course, it's taken much longer. No one expected Ukraine to have survived so long as an independent country. So they're probably a bit frustrated. I think President Putin expected to be in Kiev within days of invading. It did not happen. And therefore that shows that the best way forward is for countries to work together. I'm not sure that it shows any weakness on the part of the Russians or any strength on the part of the Americans. What it does show is they're talking to get the US Secretary of State and to get the Foreign Minister of Russia in the same room talking about the same topic. That's a big win for all, I think. We just need to make sure they see it through to the end.
Yes, indeed. And thank you very much for sharing that. You will stay with us as we stay on the region. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz